My name is Clara Holloway, and for most of my 29 years, I've considered myself a fairly unremarkable person. I live in Oak Haven, a city that hugs the coastline, where the scent of salt and damp earth often hangs in the air. I've always found a quiet comfort in its misty mornings and the rhythmic sigh of the waves against the shore. I work as a user interface designer for ClearPath Innovations, a small software company. It's methodical work, designing systems that are intuitive and calm, and I suppose that suits my nature. I've always been the one to smooth things over, to listen more than I speak, to ensure the currents of life around me flowed with as little disruption as possible, especially where my family was concerned. The message arrived not with a bang, but with the familiar, almost apologetic chime of my phone at 8:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. The family group chat, a digital space I usually navigated with a kind of weary politeness, flickered on my screen. I was by the window, watching the rain sketch silver lines down the glass, a cup of herbal tea warming my hands. I'd learned to keep notifications for that chat on a low hum, a background murmur in the symphony of a life I was trying to build for myself. I wasn't expecting much, perhaps a reminder about an upcoming bill or a vaguely passive query about my weekend. Instead, I saw a single line from my mother, Vivian. It sat there, stark against the soft gray of the chat interface. Honestly, Clara, no one is really up for celebrating your birthday this year. Perhaps it's time you moved past these childish things. I read it once, then again, the steam from my tea curling around my face. The words themselves weren't a shock. It was the casual cruelty, delivered so openly, for my father, Arthur, and my younger sister, Chloe, to witness. There was no softening emoji, no trailing love, Mum. Just the pronouncement, like a gavel falling in an empty room. I set my teacup down on the worn wooden sill. The rain continued its gentle patter, indifferent. I didn't feel a surge of anger or the familiar prickle of tears. Instead, a profound stillness settled over me, like the quiet that falls after a storm has finally passed, leaving the air washed clean. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady, and typed a single word in reply, understood. Then, with a breath that felt like the first truly deep one I'd taken in years, I navigated to my banking app. The monthly transfer of $1,850 for the little bungalow in Willow Creek, where my parents lived, was scheduled for the next day. It was a charming place from the outside, with roses my mother, Vivian, fussed over, but inside, the damp had a way of seeping into everything, a mirror, I often thought, for the atmosphere within its walls. I'd been covering that rent, and often more, for 5 years. With a tap, I canceled the automatic payment. My heart didn't pound. My breath didn't catch. It felt like closing a book I'd read too many times, whose ending I already knew by heart. Then, I found the family group chat and selected archive. The little notification bubble vanished. The silence in my small apartment felt different. It wasn't the silence of loneliness, which I knew well, but the silence of space, of something cleared away to make room. I walked to my tiny kitchen, the floorboards cool beneath my bare feet, and made myself another cup of tea this time, a strong black blend. I sat at my small kitchen table, watching the light outside shift as the rain clouds began to break. A patch of pale sunshine touched the far wall, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Something within me, a tightly coiled spring I hadn't even realized I was holding, had gently, irrevocably unwound. I looked at the calendar hanging by the door. A small, neat circle marked today's date. Clara 29, I'd written in blue ink. I took a small, silver thumbtack from a nearby corkboard and pinned a pressed wildflower, a forget-me-not I'd saved from a walk last spring, directly over the circle. It wasn't a cancellation, but a quiet reclaiming. The next morning, the sun was a shy watercolor wash over Oak Haven. I drove my own aging hatchback towards Willow Creek. The streets were quiet, the dew still clinging to the grass in the small front gardens. I didn't plan to knock or to engage. I simply pulled up a little way down the street from the bungalow. On my phone, I opened the tracking app for the pale green compact car I'd purchased 3 years prior. My sister, Chloe, had needed something reliable and cute for her various artistic endeavors and endless search for inspiration. The monthly payments, the insurance, it had all come from my account. I saw its little icon parked right in their driveway. I pressed the remote unlock feature on the app. The car's lights blinked twice, a small, silent acknowledgement. I stepped out of my car and walked calmly towards it. The keys, I knew, would be in the ignition or tucked into the sun visor. Chloe was never one for meticulous security. They were in the visor. The interior smelled faintly of patchouli and old coffee. A sketchbook lay on the passenger seat, filled with half-finished drawings and dramatic, looping handwriting. I didn't touch it. I simply started the engine, its hum a little rougher than I remembered, and drove away. No one emerged from the house. No curtains twitched, as far as I could tell. There was no triumph in that moment, no flush of victory. Just a quiet sense of order being restored, like putting a misplaced item back in its rightful place. Back in my apartment, the scent of fresh coffee brewing filled the air. I called my bank, then the credit card company. I requested that all supplementary cards issued under my name be canceled immediately. "Is there a particular reason, Ms. Holloway?" the polite voice on the other end asked. I paused, then said, simply, "A change in personal circumstances." That felt true enough. Later that afternoon, with the sun now streaming more confidently through my window, I pulled out a plain, manila folder from the bottom drawer of my desk. It wasn't labeled with anything dramatic, just household accounts family. I'd started it almost without thinking, years ago. I was 24, just landed my first proper design role at ClearPath Innovations. It wasn't a high-flying career, but it was steady, creative, and it paid enough for me to have my own small place and a little left over. I remember calling home, my voice full of a shy pride. My mother's response hadn't been, "Congratulations, darling." It had been a sigh, followed by, "Oh, Clara, that's a relief. Things have been so difficult for your father and me." His hours at the workshop were cut again. It began with just helping out with the rent for 1 month. Then it was the unexpectedly high electricity bill because the old heating in the bungalow was inefficient. "Your mother's rheumatism plays up so dreadfully in the cold, you know," Father would say, his voice heavy with unspoken burdens. Then Chloe needed art supplies, essential for her portfolio, or funds for a networking workshop that always seemed to coincide with a music festival in the next county. Within 2 years, I was systematically covering their rent, utilities, Chloe's phone plan, grocery top-ups, and even the vet bills for their aging spaniel, Barnaby. They rarely asked directly for large sums. It was always a series of small, urgent needs, couched in sighs and hints. "You're so capable, Clara. We always knew you were the sensible one. We poured so much into raising you girls. It's just a comfort to know you're in a position to give back a little now." Chloe, bless her, floated through life on a cloud of good intentions and vague aspirations. She was curating her personal brand, which seemed to involve a lot of beautifully filtered photos of her meditating in scenic spots, often paid for by a small loan from me for wellness retreats or sketching in cafes, a wistful expression on her face. The new car, the pale green one, had been her choice. "It just has such a gentle aura, Clara, don't you think?" she'd cooed. She'd posted countless selfies with it, one captioned, "Feeling so supported on my journey. Immense gratitude for those who believe in my light. You know who you are." She hadn't tagged me. Mother had called later, her voice bright. "Wasn't that a lovely post from Chloe? She truly does appreciate your support, dear, even if she's not always the best at saying it directly." I'd murmured something about being glad she was happy, but the word support felt hollow, more like a levy I was expected to pay. Month after month, I'd tell myself this would be the time I'd set a boundary. I'd explain that I needed to save for my own future, perhaps for a down payment on a small studio or a course to advance my own skills. But then the call would come, Vivian's voice tight with anxiety about an overdue notice, or Arthur sounding defeated about another setback. The guilt, subtle and pervasive as the Oakhaven mist, would creep in. We're your family, Clara. Who else do we have to turn to? Strangers wouldn't understand. Each time I relented, a small part of me whispered that I was being compassionate, that this was the duty of a loving daughter and sister. But as I sat there, the folder open on my lap, the neat columns of figures and scanned receipts telling a different story, I saw it with a painful, startling clarity. It wasn't viewed as kindness. It was treated as an entitlement, a quiet tax on my existence. I closed the folder gently. On my laptop screen, a notification from a social media site blinked. Chloe had posted a new image, her, silhouetted against a sunset, on a yoga mat overlooking the ocean. The caption read, "True healing begins when you create space for your soul to breathe." I remember one particular Easter, about 2 years ago. I'd driven the hour and a half to Willow Creek with a homemade lemon drizzle cake, my mother's favorite, and a bottle of crisp white wine. I hadn't called ahead, hoping to surprise them, imagining a flicker of warmth, perhaps even delight. Maybe this time, it would feel like a genuine family gathering. I'd knocked, balancing the cake carefully. Vivian opened the door, her expression blank for a moment before a faint, surprised "Oh, Clara, you're here." She turned, calling into the house, "Chloe, dear, your sister's arrived." Perhaps Michael should move his things from the spare room. Michael was Chloe's latest beau, an intense young man who seemed to communicate primarily in mumbles. The spare room had, until recently, still held a few of my old books and art college portfolios. No one suggested he sleep on the sofa. I found myself relegated to it that night, under a thin, synthetic blanket that smelled of old potpourri and a faint, lingering sense of being an afterthought. Dinner was strained. Arthur carved the roast chicken with a heavy sigh, remarking on the price of good poultry. At one point, he raised his glass of water. He'd given up alcohol, he said, for his health, though I suspected it was more for his wallet. "A toast," he'd announced, "to Clara. She keeps a roof over our heads, even if she can't seem to find a nice young man to settle down with." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter went around the table. Chloe giggled into her napkin. Even Michael managed a smirk. I felt a flush creep up my neck, but I smiled weakly and sipped my wine. My contribution was an accepted fact, my personal life, or lack thereof, a subject for casual family amusement. Later, when the kitchen sink clogged dramatically during washing up, it was my wallet that opened to pay the emergency plumber who arrived amidst dessert. No one offered to contribute. As I was leaving the next morning, Vivian patted my arm. "It was nice to see you, dear. But next time, do call ahead. We might have had other plans, you know." The drive back to Oakhaven had been quiet. I didn't play music. I didn't call a friend. I watched the gray ribbon of road unwind before me, the coastal landscape blurred by a persistent drizzle. And I realized, with a startling pang, that I felt lighter, freer, driving away from them than I ever did arriving. A week later, a colleague at ClearPath, a kind woman named Sarah, leaned over my cubicle. "Clara, wasn't that your sister I saw on that travel blog? Looked like a fantastic weekend away in the Pine Ridge cabins." My heart gave a small, tired thud. I navigated to the blog. There they were, Vivian, Arthur, Chloe, and Michael, beaming, wrapped in cozy scarves, holding mugs by a crackling fire. I zoomed in. Chloe's mug, a bright, cheerful yellow, had "World's Best Sister" written on it in jaunty script. The steady drip of requests and unspoken expectations continued, but something had begun to shift within me after that Easter. It wasn't anger, not yet, but a growing sense of disquiet, a feeling that the ground beneath my feet was not as solid as I had believed. It was a gray Wednesday afternoon, the kind where the sky feels like a lid pressed down on the world, when another little digital tremor ran through the family group chat, the one I hadn't yet archived at that point. I was working from my apartment, trying to untangle a particularly tricky navigation flow for a new client project. I glanced at my phone, assuming it was Chloe asking for a recipe or mother reminding me about a distant cousin's anniversary. Instead, it was Arthur. He'd posted a screenshot of my private online wish list. It contained a few simple things: a particular brand of chamomile tea I found soothing, a set of fine-tipped drawing pens I liked, a pair of soft, woolen socks for the coming autumn. Things I often meant to buy for myself, but somehow never got around to. "Look at our Clara," his message read, appended below the screenshot. "Almost 30 and still asking for fuzzy socks and sleepy time tea. You'd think we'd raised her to be a bit more ambitious." A string of laughing emojis followed from Chloe, then a meme she'd clearly found online. A cartoon character wearing a party hat, looking forlorn with the caption, "Is it my birthday again already?" Even my Aunt Carol, Mother's sister, who I'd once helped with a substantial deposit for a course she desperately wanted to take, added a polite but unmistakable haha reaction. No one spoke up for me. Not Vivian, who usually at least feigned a gentle reprimand. Silence from everyone else. I felt a familiar coldness seep into my chest. It wasn't the items on the list, or even the teasing itself. It was the public nature of it, the casual way my small, private desires were exposed and mocked, as if I were a slightly dim-witted child they were all indulging. I didn't reply. I didn't type out an angry retort or a wounded explanation. I simply took a screenshot of the chat, then another and another, capturing the entire exchange. I saved them to a new folder on my laptop. I named it, simply, Observations. I didn't know why I was doing it, not precisely. It wasn't for revenge. It was, I think, a need to anchor what was happening in something tangible, to prove to myself that the discomfort, the subtle erosion of my spirit, wasn't just a figment of my oversensitive imagination. The next morning, Chloe posted a photo of herself at a trendy new spa overlooking the Oakhaven Marina. She was holding a vibrant green smoothie, her expression serene. Choose peace. Choose light. Choose to surround yourself with energies that lift you higher, the caption read. I recognized the distinctive blue mosaic tiles of the spa's relaxation area. I'd paid for a day pass for her there the previous month, a stress relief gift after she'd complained of feeling overwhelmed by her creative process. My phone buzzed again. A new message in the family chat, this time from Vivian. "Oh dear, the gas company is threatening to cut us off. Arthur's pension payment is delayed again. I just don't know what we'll do for hot water." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the credit monitoring service I'd subscribed to a few months earlier, a nagging unease prompting the small monthly expense. I hit refresh. An email notification had arrived an hour before, unread. "Your consolidated loan statement is now available." Consolidated loan? I didn't have a loan with that institution. My student loan was with a different provider and diligently paid. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. I clicked the link, my hand trembling slightly as I typed in my social security number and date of birth to access the portal. And there it was, an outstanding balance of $6,200. The loan had been taken out 8 months prior. My name was listed as the primary borrower. My father, Arthur Holloway, was listed as a co-borrower. The stated purpose, essential home improvements. I remembered a vague conversation around that time, Vivian mentioning the old boiler in the bungalow was on its last legs and the roof had developed a persistent leak. "Praying for a mild winter, Clara," she'd said, her voice laced with worry. "We simply can't afford any major repairs right now." I had offered to help with a small, direct payment to a repairman, but they'd said they were looking into options. I never imagined this was the option they'd found. The following day, my hands still feeling cold despite the mild spring air, I requested my full credit report. The loan was there, of course. But so was something else, a department store credit card from Harrington's Fine Goods, a rather upscale place I rarely frequented. It had been opened 18 months ago. My name, my credit history, but the mailing address for statements was the Willow Creek Bungalow. The balance was almost maxed out, just over $3,000 on purchases of new bedding, kitchenware, and a rather expensive set of garden furniture I vaguely recalled seeing on their patio during my last brief visit. When I called Vivian, my voice was carefully neutral. "Mother, I was reviewing my credit report, and there seems to be a Harrington's card I don't recall opening." Her response was breezy, almost dismissive. "Oh, that. Yes, we needed a few bits and bobs for the house, and your credit was so much better than ours, dear. You weren't using that line of credit anyway." "Don't be so dramatic, Clara. It's all for the family." Dramatic. That word again. It was their shield, their way of deflecting any accountability, of painting my valid concerns as emotional overreactions. Later that week, a colleague, David, who worked in the marketing department at ClearPath, stopped by my desk. "Hey Clara," he said, friendly as always. "Ran into your sister Chloe at that new gallery opening downtown the other night. She's quite the character. She mentioned you were a bit of a homebody? Said you found social situations overwhelming, something about being highly sensitive." He shrugged, clearly meaning no harm. "I just thought it was interesting, because you're always so calm and focused here." I managed a small, polite smile. "Yes, Chloe can be rather protective." I turned back to my screen, the cursor blinking patiently. But inside, something fractured. Highly sensitive. Overwhelmed. It was the narrative they wove, the explanation for my quietness, my preference for solitude, my reluctance to engage in their constant, low-level dramas. It wasn't that I was discerning or weary or simply different. No, I was fragile. It made my compliance, my silence, understandable. Convenient. That evening, I created another folder on my laptop. This one I labeled the Quiet Ledger. Into it went the screenshots from the group chat, copies of the loan agreement, the credit card statements. I found the saved voicemail from Vivian from the time Chloe had dramatically threatened to drop out of a pottery course that I was funding. Vivian's voice, raw with unshed tears and a strange, steely anger, had pleaded, "Clara, you have to help her finish this. She'll end up with nothing, stuck in a rut just like, well, Is that what you want for your sister?" The implication, unspoken but brutally clear, hung in the air long after the message ended. It didn't matter if I was highly sensitive or not. What mattered was how that label served them, how it excused their actions and preempted any protest from me. I wasn't being quiet out of grace or stoicism anymore. I was simply fading, bit by bit, from the frame of my own life, while they rearranged the furniture in the space I vacated, funded by the credit of my silence. So, I began to meticulously document. I saved emails with their subtle requests. I noted dates and times of calls where urgent needs were expressed. I even started discreetly recording phone conversations, the little red light on my app glowing like a tiny, watchful eye. Not for confrontation, not then, but for my own sanity. To have a record, a map of the emotional terrain I had been navigating blindly for so long. This ledger was becoming my compass, pointing towards a truth I was slowly, painfully, beginning to acknowledge. A strange sort of calm descended in the weeks that followed my initial quiet stand, the cancellation of the rent, the retrieval of the car. The family group chat remained archived, a silent tomb. My phone, blessedly, was quieter. No urgent pleas, no passive-aggressive digs, no sudden emergencies requiring my immediate financial intervention. It was an unnerving peace, like the stillness in the air before a much larger storm. I half expected a barrage of angry calls, of tearful recriminations. But there was nothing. Just a heavy, watchful silence. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, almost 3 weeks to the day since Vivian's birthday message, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My heart gave a small jump. But it was Chloe. "Hi, Clara. It's Chloe." Using a friend's phone. "Mom says, can you come over for dinner on Friday? She wants to talk things through, clear the air. Said it's important. For the family. I stared at the message, the words blurring slightly. Clear the air. It sounded so reasonable, so mature. But a small, cold knot formed in my stomach. It didn't feel like an olive branch. It felt like a summons, a carefully laid trap disguised as reconciliation. For years, clearing the air had meant me listening to their grievances, their justifications, their subtle accusations, until I inevitably apologized for some perceived slight, some boundary I hadn't even realized I'd crossed in their eyes. And normal service, my compliance was resumed. But this time, something was different. The quiet ledger on my laptop was no longer just a collection of painful memories. It was a testament to a truth I could no longer ignore. I took a deep breath. Okay, Chloe, I typed back. Friday is fine. What time? 7, she replied almost instantly. Mom's making her casserole. Vivian's beef casserole. The traditional dish of peacemaking in our family, usually served after a period of unspoken tension, a culinary signal that always meant to be forgiven, if not forgotten. On Friday evening, I pulled my old hatchback up to the curb outside the Willow Creek bungalow at precisely 6:58 p.m. The roses by the porch were in full, blowsy bloom, their scent heavy and sweet in the cool evening air. In my tote bag, alongside a small, plain notebook and a pen, was my laptop and a slim USB drive. The laptop contained the quiet ledger, meticulously organized. I wore simple dark jeans, a soft gray sweater, and flat shoes. I wasn't there to make a statement with my appearance. I wasn't there for a dramatic confrontation. I was there, I realized with a sudden clarity, to gently close a very long, very painful chapter. They greeted me with a performance of strained normalcy. Vivian opened the door, a wavering smile on her lips, and brushed my cheek with a cool, dry kiss. Clara, darling, come in, come in. Arthur grunted a hello, Clara, from his armchair, the television muttering in the background. Chloe hovered in the hallway, offering a bright, brittle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Good to see you, sis. The table was set with their usual mismatched crockery. The casserole, smelling rich and familiar, sat in the center. The air was thick with unspoken things. They let me sit for a moment, then Vivian began, her voice softer than usual. Clara, dear, we've all been, well, rather worried about you. This distance. It's not like you. We're your family. We need to be able to talk to each other. Arthur chimed in, his tone more accusatory. You can't just cut people off, Clara. That's not how families work. We've always been here for you. Chloe added, her voice laced with a familiar note of wounded innocence. We were all really hurt, you know. Especially about the car. And the rent. Mom's been so stressed. I listened quietly, letting their words settle in the small, cluttered dining room. The old grandfather clock in the hall ticked with a heavy, portentous rhythm. When they paused, expecting, I suppose, my apology, my capitulation, I took a slow, deliberate breath. Thank you for inviting me, I began, my voice even, calm. I appreciate the opportunity to talk. I reached into my bag and took out my laptop, placing it on the table. No one moved to stop me. I opened it, the screen casting a pale light on our faces. I understand you feel hurt, I continued, my gaze moving from Vivian to Arthur, then to Chloe. But I need you to understand my perspective, the one I haven't felt able to share before. I clicked open the first file. It was an audio recording. Vivian's voice, sharp and strained, filled the small silence. She'll end up with nothing, stuck in a rut just like, well, you know. Is that what you want for your sister? Vivian flinched, her hand flying to her mouth. Next, a recording of Chloe, speaking to a friend, clearly on speakerphone, unaware I had overheard from the next room months ago. Her voice, light and dismissive. Oh, Clara? She'll cover it. She always does. It makes her feel needed, I think. Poor thing. Chloe's face paled, her eyes darting towards me, then away. Then, I displayed the screenshots, The group chat mocking my wish list, the string of polite but insistent requests for money, the bank statements showing years of transfers, the car registration in my name, the insurance payments. I turned the screen slowly so they could all see. Vivian stared, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Arthur reached for his water glass, his hand surprisingly unsteady. Chloe's jaw was clenched, a flush rising on her cheeks, but she remained silent. I then opened the quiet ledger itself, the folder containing the loan documents, the Harrington's credit card statements, my credit report with the alarming entries circled in a calm, blue ink. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply presented the facts, one by one. This loan, I said, pointing to the consolidated loan agreement, was taken out using my details without my explicit consent. This store card incurred debt in my name for items I never purchased or used. My voice was quiet, but it seemed to fill the room. You don't get to ask for peace, for things to go back to normal, when this has been the reality I've been quietly living with. I looked directly at Arthur. You used my social security number, Father. You co-signed a loan that made me primarily responsible for debt you incurred for this house. His face, usually ruddy, was ashen. He opened his mouth, but no words came. I've already reported the fraudulent activity to the credit bureau and the lender, I stated, my voice still even. The accounts are frozen. You will likely receive official notifications regarding an investigation next week. Vivian let out a small, choked sob. Chloe, however, suddenly found her voice. A harsh, brittle laugh escaped her. Oh, you are just so overly dramatic, Clara. Always have been. What are you going to do next, sue us? Take us to court? A small, sad smile touched my lips. I closed the laptop. No, Chloe, I said softly. I'm not. But perhaps he might. I stood up and walked to the front door, opening it. Standing on the porch, his expression somber, was Liam. Chloe's ex-boyfriend. The one she'd accused of all sorts of emotional distress after their messy breakup a year ago, painting him as volatile and manipulative. Chloe froze, her eyes widening in disbelief, then narrowing in sudden fury. Liam? What are you doing here? Liam stepped inside, holding a slim black portfolio. He didn't look at Chloe initially, his gaze calm and steady as he addressed Vivian and Arthur. Mrs. Holloway, Mr. Holloway. Clara invited me. There are some things I believe you need to know about Chloe's version of our breakup. He sat down at the table, in the chair I had just vacated, and opened the portfolio. Inside were printed screenshots of text messages. Messages I now saw had subtly altered timestamps, disjointed phrasing that suggested careful editing. There were transcripts of voice memos, supposedly of him yelling, but the metadata, he explained quietly, showed the audio files were created and manipulated on Chloe's laptop, not recorded from his phone. And at the bottom, a single sheet of paper, a handwritten list in Chloe's distinctive, artistic script, titled, Project Emotional Freedom L. Breakup Strategy. It detailed steps to provoke arguments, document his reactions out of context, and build a narrative of his instability. Vivian stared at the papers, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. Arthur looked stunned, his earlier bluster completely gone. Liam's voice was devoid of malice, just weary truth. Chloe told everyone I was emotionally abusive. She told Clara I was a danger to her. She even implied I was stalking her after we broke up. He finally looked at Chloe, whose face was now a mottled red. The truth is, Chloe, I was the one trying to get away from your manipulations. You aren't the perpetual victim you portray yourself to be. And I'm no longer willing to be cast as your villain. Chloe jumped up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. You have no right, I have every right to my own truth, Liam interrupted, his voice firm but not aggressive. He stood, gathered his papers, and nodded once to me. Thank you, Clara. Then he walked out, closing the door quietly behind him. I picked up my bag and laptop. The room was electric with a stunned, furious silence. I looked at my family, truly looked at them, perhaps for the first time without the filter of obligation or hope. You wanted a daughter who was a quiet, convenient source of support, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of years. You wanted the benefits of family without the responsibility of genuine care or respect. I played that part for a very long time. But I'm done now. I turned and walked out into the cool Oakhaven night. As I closed the door behind me, the shouting finally erupted. Vivian's voice, high and distraught, calling Chloe's name. Arthur's, a low roar of disbelief and anger. Then the distinct, sharp crash of something heavy, perhaps a plate or a vase, hitting a wall. I didn't look back. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away, the sounds of their imploding world fading behind me. The silence in my car this time was profound. It was the silence of a choice finally made, a heavy burden gently set down. I drove towards the coast, the scent of the Sierra balm. That night, I didn't dream. I slept, deeply and peacefully, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. The next morning, I woke to the soft glow of dawn filtering through my curtains. My small apartment felt peaceful, a sanctuary. I made coffee, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. The folder labeled The Quiet Ledger was still there. For a long moment, I simply looked at it. It contained so much pain, so much disillusionment, but also, now, a strange kind of liberation. It was the story of my journey out of the fog. With a steady hand, I created a secure, private online repository. I uploaded the key documents, the recordings, the screenshots. Not everything, just enough to paint a clear, undeniable picture. It was meticulously organized, factual, and devoid of emotional commentary. Then, I composed a single, brief post on a private social media page I rarely used but knew certain extended family members occasionally viewed. It read, "For those who have wondered about the recent changes in my relationship with my immediate family, and for my own peace of mind in moving forward, I've compiled a factual record. It's not about assigning blame, but about establishing truth." The link is private link. My only closing thought is this: I am not angry. I am not seeking retribution. I am simply choosing to no longer participate in a dynamic that was damaging my well-being. I wish them peace from a distance. I posted it, then closed the laptop. I didn't check for reactions. I didn't need to. I had spoken my truth, quietly and clearly. A few days later, word trickled back through a concerned cousin that Arthur had made a rambling, tearful video call to several relatives, claiming I was confused, overly sensitive, and easily influenced by outsiders, a clear reference to Liam. He'd apparently spoken about the importance of family loyalty and forgiveness, his voice thick with emotion, a half-empty bottle of whiskey reportedly visible on the table beside him. My cousin asked if I wanted to respond. I thought about it for a long moment. Then I simply resent her the link to the quiet ledger. "The facts speak for themselves," I wrote. "My only aim now is to heal and build a life based on mutual respect and honesty." I felt a quiet sadness for him, for the narrative he needed to believe. But it was his narrative, not mine. Not anymore. The following month, with the help of a small inheritance from a beloved great-aunt I'd been close to as a child, money I'd carefully saved for years, resisting the urge to let it be absorbed into the family's endless needs, I moved. I found a small, light-filled apartment on the third floor of an old converted warehouse overlooking a quiet stretch of the Oakhaven Marina. It wasn't grand, but it had high ceilings, large windows that let in the sea air, and a sense of calm that settled deep in my bones. I didn't provide a forwarding address to my parents or Chloe. My phone number was new. There was no name on the buzzer, just a unit number. It was my haven, a space where I could finally breathe. The calls and messages from Willow Creek eventually dwindled, then stopped. I didn't block them. I simply let them fade, like echoes from a receding shore. In the quiet solitude of my new life, an idea began to take root. I started to sketch out plans for a small, independent consultancy. I called it Quiet Anchor Designs. My focus would be on helping individuals and small, ethical businesses create clear, calm, and user-centered digital presences, much like the work I did at ClearPath, but on my own terms, imbued with my own values. The tagline I eventually settled on for my simple, elegant website was, "Navigate your path with clarity and purpose." I didn't do a splashy launch. Just a quiet announcement on my professional network, a few carefully chosen emails to potential clients whose work I admired. Slowly, work began to come in. I found I loved the autonomy, the ability to pour my energy into projects that felt meaningful. I worked from a small desk overlooking the water, the cry of gulls and the gentle clinking of halyards against masts a constant, soothing soundtrack. I read books I'd always meant to read. I took long walks along the beach, collecting sea glass and driftwood. I learned to cook nourishing meals for myself, savoring the simple act of self-care. My 30th birthday arrived on a soft, misty Tuesday, much like the one that had set so much in motion a year earlier. I didn't plan a party. Instead, I bought myself a small, uniseed lemon cake, my own quiet nod to the past, and a single, beeswax candle. That evening, I sat by my window, watched the lights of the boats bobbing in the harbor, and lit the candle. Not in celebration of the year ahead, particularly, but in quiet acknowledgement of all the years I had navigated in the dim light of obligation, and for the gentle, steady flame of self-respect I was finally nurturing within myself. A few weeks later, a small, brushed steel plaque I'd ordered arrived. I screwed it carefully into the wall above my desk. The font was clean, understated. It read, "We don't rebuild what broke you. We build what frees you." Beneath it, on a smaller, matte black plate, were 6 simple words I'd chosen with careful thought, a private smile playing on my lips. They weren't for anyone else to understand, just for me. The anchor holds. The path is clear. I stepped back, took a deep breath of the cool, salty air drifting in from the open window, and truly smiled. There was no bitterness, no lingering anger. Just a profound sense of peace, a quiet joy in the life that was now, finally, unmistakably my own. The waters ahead were unknown, but I had my compass, my anchor, and for the first time, a deep and abiding trust in my own ability to navigate the tides.